The latest research in epigenetics says we're not doomed by our genes, that in fact we're marvels of adaptability and change. So as a person started to contemplate and think about, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? What would it be like to be happy? What would it be like to live a new life? The frontal lobe is looking out into the landscape of the entire brain because it has connections to the entire neocortex, and it's got to resolve the problem. So it starts calling up different networks of neurons that are relevant to the question based on the knowledge the person learns or the experiences that they had, and it begins to seamlessly piece together this new understanding, and that's called intention. And so if you're reading a book about how to become more happy, or if you're reading a book on how to be a leader in your life, or you're studying the process, every time you learn something new, you add new connections to your brain. So now you have the raw materials for you to imagine even more. So the act of mentally rehearsing begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like it's already happened. Now, the brain is typically a record of the past, but the moment we install the neurological hardware, it becomes a map to the future. And you keep doing that, the hardware becomes a software program, which means you start thinking like a genius. You start acting like a happy person because there's no mystery there, because you installed the circuits. And then these people didn't wait for their wealth or their health to feel gratitude and to feel empowered or to feel love, a love for life. They began to feel those emotions ahead of the experience. And their body, as the unconscious mind, doesn't know the difference between the experience in their life that creates the emotion and the emotion that they're creating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in the future, in the present moment. And the stronger the emotion that they felt, the more they're going to pay attention to the thoughts they're thinking. And now all of a sudden, they're changing their biology from living in the past present reality to living in the future present reality. And I was so intrigued by this process that I went back to school to study neuroscience, because it was the answer. So then the last thing they had in common, which I thought was so amazing, is that in the internal process of rehearsing and imagining, they had long moments where they lost track of time and space, where when they opened their eyes, they thought it was maybe 15, 20 minutes later, and it was an hour and 15 minutes later. And when we get into the present moment, Umberto, there's a moment where you lose track of yourself. You forget about yourself. And only in the present moment do you have access, according to the quantum model of reality, to other possibilities. And when you're truly in the present moment, the generous present moment, that's the moment then that you are no longer living in the familiar past or the predictable future. And in order for us to change, I realized that we have to get beyond our environment. And what's our environment made of? People, husbands, kids, bosses, objects, things, places. You got to get beyond your emotions, your body, your pain, your disease. And you got to get beyond this concept of linear time. So when we get beyond our body, our environment, and time, we become pure consciousness. And now that consciousness can begin to connect to the consciousness of the field. And all of a sudden I realized that when people are nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time, that's the moment. They're no longer a face. They're no longer a culture. They're no longer a skin color. They're no longer a mother. They're no longer a grandmother. No longer a doctor or an attorney. They're no longer a nurse. They're pure consciousness. And that is the element that we begin to connect to something greater. So I wrote a book about it. And then I wound up on this documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? And that became an overnight sensation. And we did all these conferences, all the scientists all over the world. And at the end of every conference, we had panel discussions. And I started listening to the people's questions during those panel discussions. And they asked really three important questions. How do we do it? Which is a good question. How do our thoughts affect our body or our life? Second question, if our personality creates our personal reality, and it does, and our personality is made up of how we think, how we act, and how we feel, in order for me to change my personal reality, I have to change my personality. Why the hell is it so hard to change? And I thought that was a really good question. And the third thing was, what do you do? So I started teaching these Friday night, all day Saturday events and giving people the understanding of brain science and brain waves and the quantum model, and showing them pictures of neurons connecting and disconnecting, what neural nets are and how the brain works and what focus concentration looks like, and begin to create something where people could really begin to practice at home. And basically I said, okay, well, if these are the 4 principles that these people used in my first book to heal based on my investigation, it should work for sick people or normal people. The process is exactly the same. We got to unlearn and relearn. We got to break the habit of the old self, reinvent a new self. We got to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. Unmemorize emotions stored in the body, and then we have to recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, to stop signaling the same genes in the same way and begin to signal new genes in new ways, to pull our attention and our energy out of the familiar past and begin to invest our attention and energy into a new future, to go from the known to the unknown. So the model was built, and we started doing these workshops all over the world, from Australia to Mexico to Colombia to Canada to the United States to South Africa to all over Europe. We were teaching these events, and to be honest with you, the first year I didn't see many changes. We saw some people be happier, a greater sense of well-being.
Okay.
But no real breakthroughs. But at the end of these introductory level courses, people would ask, can you teach another level? So then I taught a level 2, and then at the end of that, they said, could you teach another level? Then we taught a level 3, and then they said, can you teach another level? And I said, I don't know anything else. I ran out. But right around that point, I started having some really profound mystical experiences. Those mystical moments were so profound that I couldn't go back to be Joe Dispenza again. And all of a sudden, I realized that every time I had one of those mystical moments, the first thing that I came to when I came back to who I was I have this all wrong. Like some layer of conditioning, how we're so unconscious to how we view the world. Some veil was lifted. And then all of a sudden, I got very passionate about the mystical. And so we started teaching a level 3.5. And then right around this time, all of a sudden, people started sending the emails in. My God, I was diagnosed with this condition. I was trying to get this job, and I changed my energy, and I changed this, and I started doing the work, and my body's healthy. Here's the blood tests, here's the scans. And all of a sudden, we started seeing that it started to catch on. All thoughts have a frequency. The emotion of guilt, the energy of suffering cannot carry the thought of abundance or health, because it's not the same energy. And just like you could say, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy with your conscious mind, and if your body's been emotionally conditioned into unhappiness or pain, that thought never makes it to your body, and there's no connection between the mind and body. So when people elevate their emotional states, like in a state of gratitude, the emotional signature of gratitude means the event has already happened. It means when you give thanks, you're getting something. So when you start giving thanks, your body's in a perfect state of receiving. So we want people to change their energy and to create this heart coherence, and we want to measure them. We want to know that we can say to them, you're doing it or you're not doing it. Hell, if you understand the science of the placebo, giving someone a sugar pill or a saline injection or performing some false surgery or procedure, a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the real substance or treatment, and they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals equal to the substance they think they're taking. Now, that's not light dinner conversation. That means then that pill, which is an inert substance, is a symbol that represents a possibility in the quantum field. And they begin to think about that possibility called getting well. And a certain percentage of those people will begin to feel optimistic, enthusiastic, excited, inspired, and they're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And they're beginning to reprogram their autonomic nervous system. I mean, think about it. Over 80% of the people that are in a depression study, brain scans before and after, 80% of those people have a significant change equal to people that are actually given the real substance. The people that are given the placebo, That means 4 out of 5 people are responding to the placebo just like an antidepressant. The brain scans at the end of 60 days show a dramatic change in their brain. That means they're making their own pharmacy of antidepressants by thought alone.
Yes.
So I thought, well, once I understand the dynamics, the science of the placebo, can I teach it? Well, it turns out that our students are able to do it because you don't need the sugar pill or the saline injection to combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion. Instead of selecting a known like a pill, select an unknown in the quantum field and keep revisiting it until you biologically make it known. And do it over and over again until you begin to program the gene to begin to express itself.